Afternoon and welcome to the Caroline Cymru revision sessions. This session is going to focus on Business Studies A2 and presented by me, Aled Thomas, and I'm from Llanelwedd High School. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a little while. The session will last around 45 minutes, where I'll go through some of the relevant subject content. And again, I'll go through the layout of that just after this introduction. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer section, and I'll endeavour to answer the question during the session. The session is going to be recorded, with the recording and any relevant resources uploaded to the e-sgol website in the Caroline Cymru area. I'll do that in Welsh as well. Prynawn da, chroeso i sylwi adolygu Caroline Cymru, bydd y sesiwn yma'n canolbwyntio ar business level a 2 ac yn cael ei rhedeg gan fi, Aled Thomas, o Ysgol Uwchradd Llanelwedd. Bydd y sesiwn yn para tua 45 munud, lle bydd fi yn mynd trwy'r cynnwys berthnasol. Os oes gennych chi unrhyw gwestiynau, byddwn ni'n chwarae'r holi a ateb, a byddwn ymdrechu'r ateb eich cwestiwn yn ystod y sesiwn. Bydd y sesiwn yn cael ei recordio gyda recordiad a'r adnoddau berthnasol yn cael ei wychlwytho ar wefan e-sgol ar ardal Caroline Cymru. I'll be doing this session in English, okay, I won't be flitting between the two. Okay, so as I said, this is WJC Business Studies A2. This is me when I'm slightly better turned out than I am this evening. I've taught in a number of different places. I've taught at an inner city school in Birmingham. I've taught at a sort of very high achieving private school in Spain and Madrid. And I've taught in a sort of rural school. So three relatively different settings. And I think I've got quite a lot of experience so things I've picked up from different places that can kind of give you some hints and tips of how to maybe sort of achieve as much as you can do in your upcoming exams. So I'm going to go through some sort of WJC sort of admin stuff so that you're kind of aware of what the course is. Okay, I'm going to assume you kind of know a lot, so I'm going to kind of probably just go over it relatively quickly. Okay, so what does the exam board say? Why would you study business studies? Okay, well, there's a lot of reasons for it. Okay, to understand how businesses work. Okay, come up with new ideas, make decisions, analyze, problem solve. Okay, and use some basic sort of numerical skills. Okay, realistically, what this course is about is to sort of teach you knowledge of how businesses work. Okay, but really the skills involved in it is for you to be able to display that knowledge, apply that knowledge to a context, be it a case study, okay, look at different situations and say what's good and what's bad about it, okay, and then look at those good and bad points and come to a decision, okay, and justify that decision. The reason we do this is because it makes you a much more occupationally mobile member of society, okay, because if you think about it, what a lot of jobs are, okay, is looking at a situation going, this is what's good, this is what's bad, let's improve it, this is the justification behind it, okay, and that's realistically what a job is. Okay, that's really what my job is. Okay, so I look at a student's work, I kind of go, right, this is the good points of it, this is what you need to improve, okay, let's go and do something about it and let's evaluate it at the end. Okay, so what the exams are going to be that you can be sitting this May, June. Okay, both exams are 2 hours and 15 minutes, okay, and both represent sort of 50% of the A2 qualification. Okay, so 50% of it is on A3, 50% of it is on Unit 4. Okay, but obviously there is a greater weighting on the stuff that you've done in Year 13. Okay, so overall it works out that they're worth 60% of the AS and the A2 combined. Okay, and I'll go through what kind of exams you're going to kind of be looking at and coming up against on the next few slides. Okay, so Unit 3, like I said, a 2 hours 15 minutes paper. Okay, and it builds upon a lot of theory that comes from Unit 1 and Unit 2. Okay, so we're looking at sort of finance stuff that you've done in 1 and 2, some of the marketing stuff. Okay, some of the aims and objectives thing. Okay, so it does sort of follow on from that. Obviously takes it quite a little bit deeper, and this is probably the more businessy, if that is even a word, of the two units. Okay, whereas if we compare it to Unit 4, okay, again it's a 2 hours and 15 exam. Okay, but if we look at the content of it, okay, globalization, international trade, pest factors, change. Okay, there is there's a lot of business in there, but it probably complements relatively well with like a geography qualification, okay, as well. All right, so we'll look at that a little bit later on down the line. Okay, so what are the exams going to look like? Okay, so Unit 3 and Unit 4, if you compare them to your Unit 1 and Unit 2 papers, okay, so your AS papers, there's going to be very little sort of short answer response. Okay, they pretty much go boom flat out into sort of essay questions. Okay, so we're looking at those higher order analysis and evaluation skills in this paper. Okay, now Unit 4, you get a large case study. Okay, a lot of essay questions and run long essay questions worth 20 marks. Okay, this has a real weighting upon analysis and evaluation. Okay, and I'll go through what I mean by that on the next few slides. Okay, really how things are structured, and this will sort of help explain how I'm going to go about going over some of the stuff in this session. Okay. So, if you've got to this point, you've kind of done your AS qualification, okay, you probably have an understanding of what AO1, AO2, AO3 are, okay, all right, but I will recap on it for those who maybe don't know, okay. So if we look at the sort of the bottom of this triangle is referred to as Bloom's taxonomy, okay, and this is really the basis of how we go about teaching you, okay, and if you ever do a teaching degree, teaching qualification, they'll go on about this Bloom's taxonomy till the cows come home, okay. All right, so on a very basic level, what we're looking for you to be able to do is to understand the content, okay, so which is why, you start off with probably by looking at some of the key terms in every single unit that you do, so you have an understanding of what needs to be understood. Okay, so you need to be able to sort of explain some of the key terms and what they are. Okay, at this level, if all you're doing is kind of understanding the content, okay, you're restricting yourself to quite a low grade there. Okay, all right, and then the next stage of that on AO2, okay, is your application, is your ability to sort of apply that knowledge that you've learned to a given situation. Okay, so for Unit 3 and Unit 4, you're going to be given case studies, okay, and the expectation is you're able to sort of take the content that you understood and apply it to the case study that you've been given. Okay, AO3 is the next step, okay, where you are starting to sort of look at the positives and negatives of a certain situation. Okay, so you are displaying that you know something, okay, you've looked at the different contexts, okay, and now you're going, this is what's good and this is what's bad. Okay, at this level, sometimes it's not just a what's good and what's bad, it's a more of a kind of I agree with this and I disagree with it. Okay, so it's basically looking at two sides of the argument, be it reasons for or reasons that you agree or reasons against or reasons that you disagree. Okay, all right, and then the sort of the higher level, okay, is your AO4, your evaluate. Okay, and basically what you do is you have to show that you can make a decision, okay, and then you can justify it. Now, up to this point, okay, in AS level and in GCSE level, your evaluation has kind of probably just been, I believe that this, I believe this because, and you use some sort of case study evidence or something like that, okay, to sort of justify it, okay. However, at this level, okay, and if we look at the weighting on the next couple of slides of your paper, your evaluations have to be a lot more kind of in-depth and has to take in a lot more into consideration than simply just, I believe this because of full stop. Okay, you have to take into consideration things like how it impacts different stakeholders, how it might, what might be the difference between the short term and long term. Okay, all right, you might need to sort of almost do an evaluation within an evaluation where you look at the points that you've made so far. Okay, so your evaluations have to be taken that step further, but we will look at some real specific examples on the sort of the last few sessions. Okay, all right. So sort of justify my point here, if you have a look at particularly the AO3 and AO4 sort of columns. Okay, if you compare how much importance is given to AO3 and AO4 in Unit 1 and compare it to Unit 4, you start to see that there is a much higher, a much greater importance upon you being able to display these analytical and evaluative skills at this stage. Okay, all right. So that's why we'll probably take a lot more time towards the end of this looking at how to write analytically and how to write effectively evaluatively. Okay. Okay, we'll move on from that one. Right, now, if you've studied this Unit 3 so far this year, what you've probably noticed is that a plethora of the content has been taken out. So a lot of it isn't going to be there anymore. Okay, all right. Even sort of whole units have been, whole sections have been taken out of this unit. Okay, so the whole of the investment appraisals. Okay, now, you know, you don't need to visit decision trees and critical path analysis. Okay, they're one of the most complex stuff you'll do across the whole of the whole of the A level. Okay, however, there are a couple of things that might be worth kind of having an understanding of. Okay, price and income elasticity of demand, you'll never get a question on it, but it's a useful concept to be able to sort of bring into some of your answers regardless. Okay, so I would probably have a look at, just, you know, scan and have a look over what those are and make sure it's relatively clear. Okay, so sort of the structure of how this is all going to go over the next 4 weeks. Okay, so basically I'm going to start with sort of going over some of the Unit 3 content and Unit 4 content. Okay, I want to sort of try and gloss over it as quickly as possible with sort of pausing at certain bits. Okay, because I think the important thing is to sort of try and apply that and have a look at some specific questions and sort of like, this is what, you know, we would do in this kind of question in particular. Okay, all right. Now, in terms of how I will look at everything, okay, all right, so this is the content for Unit 3, okay, so what I will do is I will look in each different section in turn. Okay, I've grouped Section 1 and Section 2 together, okay, but after this I'll go through Section 3, Section 4, okay. I'm a relatively OCD with this sort of thing, but I think it helps people maybe organise their revision sort of a little bit more effectively, okay. So what I'll present you with at the start of every single section, okay, is what the learning objectives are, what we're trying to achieve. Okay, I'm not going to pause massively on this one. Okay, your learning objectives. Okay, just real clear what we're going to be speaking about for the next few minutes anyway. Okay, all right. If you're looking back on this on the Callum Cumming website, you can use this to pause and just sort of check, right, this is what I need to make sure that I know. Okay, going forward, do I know this? Okay. I've also included on here the key terms that you need to have an understanding of. Okay, all right. So, you know, on this one, okay, again, I'm not going to pause very long on this one, okay, but I would be sort of anticipating and expecting you to sort of have a good knowledge and be able to explain to me what these key terms are. Okay, now going forwards, okay, on each section, I have made some assumptions that you know some of the simple things. Okay, so I can dedicate a little bit more time to the sort of more complex things. Okay, I don't want to sort of spend ages explaining something that isn't particularly complicated. Okay, all right. Now, okay, so the first section is about analysing data. Okay, now, again, I don't think I'm going to pause particularly long on this one. Okay, you know, a lot of this can be really straightforward. You have to know what a pie chart, bar chart, histogram, line graph, okay, is. All right, I'd say that's almost sort of like, you know, yes, I'm doing some of this. I teach year 7 maths as well. I'm doing quite a few of these with them. So I'd hope that hopefully you'd understand what they are. Okay, you also have to have a good understanding of the advantages and disadvantages of it. The only one that's maybe slightly complicated here is index numbers. Okay, now index numbers essentially getting sort of your original year to sort of represent 100, okay, and then that allows you to compare sort of previous years or future years, okay, and it's used for various things, okay, like comparing exchange rates or comparing you know, increasing revenue or something like that. Okay, all right. Now, a lot of this, okay, this whole unit of work, this whole of Unit 3 is basically you comparing different kinds of quantitative and qualitative data, okay? Straightforward, you know, you can probably see it in the terminology that we're using here, okay? Quantitative has the word quantify in it, okay, and that is data based upon numbers, numerical information, okay, and this information can be analyzed, okay, graphs can be produced and so on, okay. It's, you know, it's very evidence kind of based, where qualitative data, okay, gives you maybe a sort of more of an in-depth response, okay. So if you can imagine, your quantitative data, the one we were just talking about before, might be if you were doing a market research survey and you had very closed questions like what color do you want the change of uniform to? Blue, green, black, red, okay? Where you kind of get that information in and you could kind of go, 6 people said this, okay, and you have some evidence, okay? But you don't really have any sort of in-depth information about maybe how people feel about a changing color of the school uniform, for example, okay? So qualitative data, even though it's maybe difficult to analyze, okay, because it's based on kind of emotions, feelings, opinions, motivations, and so on, okay, it can give you slightly more in-depth information. Now, what a lot of questions, or what a lot of the sections involve is you comparing quantitative data and qualitative data, okay? And I can almost guarantee, because the amount of stuff that's been taken out in Unit 3, a question will come up regarding compare the use of quantitative data versus qualitative data for this business. I can almost guarantee that question will come up, okay? All right. Okay. So we've kind of gone through what quantitative and what qualitative data is, okay? So we can kind of move on a little bit. So moving on to sales forecasting, okay, so we've kind of real glossed over chapter 1 and chapter 2. Chapter 1, chapter 2 really give you sort of basic, almost introduction and understanding of kind of what's going to be going forward, okay. Right, what we're looking at in this section of work, okay, really is a difference between essentially, again, quantitative and qualitative methods of sales forecasting, okay. I think this could be a question that comes up, okay, if you have looked over past papers. There was a question on quantitative and qualitative sales forecasting methods that was done in 2017. So you probably guess that it's due to sort of come right background on that cycle, okay. These are the key terms, okay, and we'll sort of have a look at some of those while we're sort of talking about the different methods. Okay, all right, so sales forecasting is basically the art of trying to predict sort of future demand, what your customers are going to want, okay, all right, and it's basically using past experience, business data to sort of forecast what's going to happen in the future, and what we call that extrapolation, okay. However, it can be difficult for a number of reasons, okay. Sometimes a new business or a market, okay, for various reasons, like it might be dynamic, it might be new, doesn't have any historical information that you can go on, okay, all right. You're going to sort of collect market research data, okay. However, that doesn't always guarantee that people are going to follow through with what they've said, okay. And you can't really predict, maybe economic shocks, okay. Maybe if you're thinking about sort of 3 months ago, we wouldn't have been able to sort of predict the fact that there was going to be a high fluctuation in petrol costs. We couldn't have predicted there was definitely going to be an outbreak of war in Ukraine, okay, and these all have an impact upon an economy and has an impact upon in turn on your sales forecasting, okay, all right. So the various things are going to impact why sales forecasting is difficult to do. Okay, so certain methods of sales forecasting can be divided into 2 categories, okay, quantitative and qualitative, okay. Quantitative, we're talking about time series analysis and use of market research data, okay, and then qualitative, we're talking about Delphi technique, brainstorming, intuition, expert opinion. So I'm going to go through some of these now, ones that I would probably regard to be not only complicated, okay, but where I think you could potentially have a question on, okay, in your upcoming exams, okay. Okay, so time series analysis uses past evidence to sort of make a few predictions, okay? Tries to recognize trends, tries to recognize where there might be some correlation between something, okay? All right. So time series analysis can be used to do things like looking at seasonal analysis. Okay, what times of the year you're experiencing high level of sales or low levels of sales, what maybe the current trends are in your market or from competitors, maybe what happens at certain stages of the economic cycle. Okay, so what's going on in a boom, a recession, a recovery, a slump, okay, and how that generally impacts your sales. Okay, and you're going to cross-reference that with a lot of information. Okay. One thing you can do is sort of maybe plot, if we look at this graph in particular, not the highest quality one, I will admit, okay, but on the left-hand axis, you've got sales, and on the bottom, you've got sort of the time in years, okay, so from 2001 to 2016, okay, and what you can use, okay, is to look at what the sort of the past sales have been, and from that information, okay, you can start to make predictions, okay, of what your trends are going to end up being, okay, and what you also generally have is a sort of a worst case scenario and best case scenario, okay. So if sort of sales continue on this path, this is where it's going to be, okay. If there is a drop off for whatever reason, okay, or there is an economic shock, or it's in a slump in the economy, okay, maybe something, your fashion trends might change, okay, or you've got your sort of your best case scenario, okay, where the economy is recovering, doing well, okay, your business is in a sort of a rapidly growing market area, okay. All right. You can also, trend analysis is relatively similar, okay. And again, this is something that I think might come up, okay, where you might have to actually plot where your sort of sales figures are going, okay, and probably draw a dotted line to sort of show your trend going forward, okay. Again, this question hasn't come up for a few years, okay, so have a look at just reminding yourself how to plot information on a graph, looking at the different axes. This is really probably, in terms of math skills, something you probably mastered by year 8 and year 9. Okay, so don't get sort of too worried and too bogged down about your ability to plot graphs. Okay, but I would definitely have a practice of it. Okay, and I think this is a question that's going to come up, and it's a few easy marks for you to pick up. Okay. The other thing some of my students get really confused about is the 3-point moving averages. Okay, so if you look at the table on the top, okay, what you've got sales figures from January 15 to August 16. Okay, now what you might see is, if you were trying to predict and plan forwards, okay, you don't want to sort of, in terms of maybe ordering your production planning, or even sort of thinking about your human resource plan. If you sort of honed in on sort of almost monthly variations or even weekly variations, okay, of your sales figures, you can kind of maybe get slightly bogged down and make it a little more difficult, your planning. Okay, so what we do is we do sort of a 3-point moving average, where if you look at if you look at the bottom table now, you've got Jan 15, Feb 15, March 17. March 15, okay, sorry. So you've got the sales for January 15 is 130, the sales for February 15 is 135, and the sales for March 15 is 147, okay. So what we've done there to get that figure that is below 135 is added 130, 135, 147 together, okay, divided by 3, and that has given us a figure, okay. And that helps us sort of, maybe plan our sort of production process, plan our human resource plan, okay, all right. But it also gives us sort of maybe a more even way of looking at our sort of sales predictions, okay. So if we, you could probably plot the information on here, okay, and you come up with relatively different kind of graphs. So, a 3-point moving average gives you, maybe a greater understanding of how your sales are as a trend, as opposed to maybe sort of like honing in on, individual fluctuations for so on. Okay, right. Again, this is a question that hasn't come up for a while, and it's a sort of easy bit of a gimme, okay, where you might have to plot, the sales figures of a certain business. Okay, so, I'd practice looking at plotting your line of best fit. Okay, and just remember, if you're ever sort of getting to a point where you're doing future sales, okay, start to plot it as a dotted line. Okay, so theoretically a question come up where they're going to give you the sales figures of say last 10 years. Okay, and what you're gonna have to do is carry on that chart, okay, showing sort of a line of best fit. Okay, and what you're gonna have to do is give an answer of, let's say we're looking at this example here. Okay, if you look at the graph on the right hand side, they've plotted the information, okay, and then a dotted line, and what they may ask you to do is, what are the predicted level of sales in the year 2017? So you've done the dotted line and you can sort of plot it and follow it down. Okay, so again, it's some easy marks that you can pick up. Okay, and a question I think is potentially likely to sort of turn up is to sort of plot these graphs, and what it'll do, it'll probably feed into sort of a longer mark question. So to be honest, if you haven't been able to sort of plot these correctly and get the right conclusions from the graphs, then that's probably going to mess up your answer for your long mark question. Okay, so it's definitely worth having a look at. Okay, so all of this, okay, I've touched upon a lot of them. So how useful are they? Okay, so it helps the business plan ahead, thinks about maybe when they need to maybe borrow money, okay, or when what the budget's going to be. Okay, it helps production planning, so when the resources need to be in to produce some new goods. Okay, when do we need to have a certain amount of staff in? When might be a quiet time for you to do some training on your staff? Okay, helps identify periods of where you might be seeing less sales due to the economic cycle, due to the season. Okay, and it's helped, really going to help reduce risk going forward. Okay, so using data to sort of inform what might happen. Okay, and sort of so you're a lot more prepared for what might come up. Okay, it's almost sort of like if you fail to prepare to fail. Okay, all right. However, there are drawbacks to doing this. Okay, it isn't always predict the future. Okay, and what's happened in the past doesn't always mean it's definitely going to sort of continue on that. Okay, you can all think of sort of clothes that have come in and out of fashion. Okay, you can kind of look at maybe what's the sales would have been the last 3 years. Definitely doesn't mean the next 3 years are going to follow suit. Okay, all right. You're never going to guarantee 100% success all the time, okay, of your predictions. Okay, I think it definitely helps sort of model things and reduce risk. Okay, but it definitely doesn't mean it's what you say is going to happen is going to happen. Okay, and you can't really sort of do long-term forecasts. Okay, it's only really going to be 6, 12, 18, 2 years maximum. Okay, your ability to sort of predict what's going to happen. Okay. Right, you can also use market research data. Okay, so anything that indications of what people are going to buy, how much they're going to spend. Okay, all right. So you can survey all this information as much as you want. Okay, but it doesn't guarantee they're definitely going to follow through with those. Okay, almost the difference between demand and effective demand. Okay, demand is essentially, we all want to buy a Ferrari car. So if we were all asked, do you want to buy it, you would all say yes, but do you actually have the ability to follow through with that? Well, no. Okay, and that's the unreliability of relying upon some market research data. Okay, right, so what are the qualitative methods of sales forecasting? Okay, so this is more about basing it on gut feeling. Okay, what do we actually think is going to happen? Okay, and what you're doing is maybe you're relying upon someone's individual experience within a certain marketplace. Okay, all right. So that's where intuition fits in. So maybe someone's been in that industry for a long time, and they can kind of go, "This is what I think is going to happen." Okay, you can maybe get together as a board of directors or a group of staff and kind of go, "This is where we kind of see things going. This is, we've looked at what our competitors are doing. This is how we think the market's going to go." Okay. The only real sort of difficult one there is the Delphi technique. Okay, just have a scan over of what that is, which is basically what they do is they survey industry experts. Okay, and what they kind of predict is going to be happening. Okay, and they sort of form more and more questionnaires based upon their responses. Okay. Now, qualitative forecasting is good because it allows people to sort of lean upon their experience and expertise. Okay, it doesn't always have to, just have to be data. Okay, you can just have a look at what people think might happen. Okay, they know their customers, they know what the trends are going to be. They've kind of been in similar situations before. Okay, it's also good when there might be no historical data available. Okay, all right. So if you think about Steve Jobs, when he started Apple, okay, there was very little historical data about the sales of computers. Okay, so really he kind of went on intuition of, this is what I think people want to be using computers for. Okay, and this is how we're going, this is how we think it's going to go, and this is going to be my sales forecast based on what I think. Okay, you also got where the market is dynamic. Okay, again, I'll use Steve Jobs as an example. Okay, he works in he worked in the technology sector. Okay, where it's continually changing. Okay, where it isn't stagnant, say like the bread or the cereal market. Okay, you've got new competitors entering the market all the time in the technology sector. You've got new products coming to market all the time. Okay, so really maybe relying upon historical data or stuff you've analysed to kind of predict what is likely to happen in the future. Okay, well, it's difficult because, and I'll quote Steve Jobs here. He said once that, how do my customers know what they want if I haven't shown them yet? Okay, well, if we were to be surveyed, okay, or if a business was sort of market orientated on sort of what features we want to see on phones, tablets, whatever, okay, we wouldn't really be able to sort of tell them because we don't have the insight, the knowledge information. Okay, and we're not really sort of down on what the latest what technology can actually do at our fingertips. Okay, we know what we currently like on our phones. Okay, and if we had relied simply upon historical data, we'd probably, our phones would probably be, a lot worse than they are now. Okay, it's the phone market has improved due to sort of like qualitative kind of sort of gut feeling. Okay, kind of sales predictions. Okay, and what people want. Okay. Disadvantages of it. Okay, it's definitely open to bias. Okay, you may be overly sentimental because it's based upon your personal opinion. If you've been working in a certain market or a certain industry for a long time, okay, you're probably either maybe overly optimistic or maybe overly negative. Okay, depending on your opinion on things at a time. Okay, and it doesn't really sort of give you sort of maybe accurate predictions. Okay, and maybe makes it difficult to sort of plan ahead. Okay, plan your human resources, plan your production, and so on. Okay, all right. Okay, so what can impact sales forecasting? We've touched upon a lot of those. Okay, so what's going on in the economy? What factor? Are we in a boom? Are we in a recession? Are we in a slump? Are we in a recovery period? Is the economy doing well? Is the economy doing badly? Okay, if you don't have an awareness of where the economy currently is at, okay, you're not going to be able to sort of make any effective sales forecasts. Okay, consumer factors. Do people want to buy your products or not? Is your product fashionable? Is it trendy? Okay, and then the final factor is, you can make all the sales forecasting as you want, but if you get a brand new competitor into the market that blows you all out the water because of what they do, okay, then your sales forecasting again goes completely out the window. Okay, so that was quite a hefty section of work. Okay, and I'm going to make a start on looking at analysing financial performance. Okay, I probably won't get through all of this because we've got about 9 minutes to go, and I don't want to sort of rush some of the stuff at the end. Okay, but what I'm going to try and do now is go through some of the financial documents and the ratios that you need to make sure that you know. Okay. So in this unit, there's a lot of things to look at. Budget variance has been taken out, which is good. Okay, all right, but we're going to need to look at balance sheets in particular and some of the ratios that come through that, and we're going to remind ourselves some of the income statement terms. Okay, because you need to use some of the income statement stuff to analyze stuff from the balance sheet. Okay, so this is what a balance sheet looks like. Okay, balance sheet is called the balance sheet because if you have a look, okay, the two figures at the net assets, okay, balances with the total shareholders capital. Okay, all right, so you've got the area in white, area in grey. Okay, now this isn't sort of strictly speaking 100% sort of correct, but the best way I try and explain it to my students is sort of the white section is kind of what you spent your money on, and the bottom grey bit is roughly where you've got your money from. Okay, now a balance sheet essentially is a snapshot, okay, of where your business currently is at, okay, and essentially how much your business is actually worth. Okay, so you might read things that Chelsea Football Club are worth £1 billion. Okay, well, some people would see that as, oh, they've got £1 billion in a bank account. No, that's not true. Okay, when they wait and they sort of add up all the assets that they've got, okay, so like the players, the training ground, the stadium, okay, whatever, okay, that adds up. Okay, once you've taken away the money that they've borrowed, okay, the business, that's how much the business is worth. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are turning over £1 billion every year, that's the amount of profit or how much revenue they're raking in. Okay, it's definitely more of an indication on sort of how much the business is actually worth. Okay, so in terms of the terminology, okay, that you need to know, okay, you've got fixed assets. Okay, now what I mean by fixed assets is assets that last longer than a year. Okay, so we're talking about premises, vehicles, machinery. Okay, and then you've got your current assets. Now these are assets that last less than a year. Okay, so the stock that you have, okay, the debtors, how much cash you have in the bank. Okay, all right. And then you've got your current liabilities. Okay, so current liabilities, okay, if you remember, the word current means less than a year. Okay, so current liabilities will include things like trade creditors. Okay, now trade creditors are people that you owe money to. Okay, and the opposite that appears on your current assets, your debtors, okay, is people that owe money to you. Okay, and then you've got your long-term or non-current liabilities. These are your long-term loans that you've taken out, probably things like your mortgages. Okay, and then you've got this figure at the bottom, net assets. Okay, that's basically sort of your total assets minus your total liabilities. Okay, and that's how we figure out net assets. Okay, and then the bottom section, shareholders capital, okay, is basically your share capital, your reserves added together, okay, and we create a balance, okay, from net assets and the total shareholders capital. Okay, so that's sort of kind of a brief introduction into balance sheets. Okay, now you need to also know some of these ratios, okay, because we need to know how to interpret a balance sheet. Okay, so we need to know what our working capital is. Okay, so our current assets minus our current liabilities. Current assets is the things that we own that last less than a year, and we take away our current liabilities, which is what we owe that's going to last less than a year. Essentially, as you can see with working capital, it's essentially the money that you run your business from day to day. Okay, so if you have a look at the previous stuff, okay, so your current assets, right, you sell your stock, you got the cash in the bank. Okay, that's what you're sort of running your that's where your money's coming from, selling your stock and the cash that you've got in the bank. Okay, and then your liabilities, okay, is you're going to be paying the suppliers that you make in order to sell your stock. Okay, and that's really what you're using to sort of run your business from day to day. Okay, liquidity ratios. Okay, the bottom two here. Okay, you got current ratio. Sorry, in the blue box, the current ratio and the asset test ratio. Okay, and what this does is it shows your ability to pay your debts off. Okay, so it looks at sort of what your sort of short-term, so your current assets are. Okay, so the things you own for less than a year. Okay, divide it by your current liability. So the money you owe to your suppliers or to any like maybe long-term, sort of short-term loans you've taken from the bank. Okay, basically because we want to see, are you able to pay off your debts? Okay, and still run as a business. Okay. Ideally, okay, you want your current assets and your current assets to be 1.5 to 2 times larger than your current liabilities, because if all your debts were called in, okay, and your current liabilities were the same as your current assets, that would mean you'd have no money to open your business the very next day. Okay, so by having your current assets to be 1.5 or 2 times bigger than your current liabilities, okay, it means that you can pay off your debt, but you can still run your business. Okay, all right. The asset test ratio is very similar. Okay, and what it does is it takes into account, okay, or takes away stock. Okay, because if you have a look at a balance sheet on the previous slide, okay, you have got a figure here for stock: 116 in 2015, 157 in 2014. Okay, now if you're basically assuming that that is how much you'll be able to sell your stock for. Okay, but you've probably seen when shops are closing down because they've had all their sort of debts called in. Okay, everything is like buy everything real cheap. Okay, so you can very rarely get rid of the stock for what you valued it at. So again, it's a good idea, okay, to have your current assets minus your stock to be, again, about 1.5 to 2 times bigger than your current liabilities. Okay, so again, that shows your ability to sort of run your business if your current liabilities get called in. Okay, now the way you display those ratios is, you know, for example, let's say it's 2 to 1, it's 2.1, okay, or 1.5.1, okay, it's always to 1. Okay, your current liabilities represent that one figure. Your current assets should hopefully be 1.5 to 2 times bigger, okay, than your current liabilities. Okay, and then the last one we're going to mention today, before we will sort of catch up on this next session next week, okay, is your gearing ratio. Okay, so this is your long-term liabilities. Okay, so your long-term loans, so the large loans that you've maybe taken out that's going to last a few years, okay, or your mortgages, okay, divided by your capital employed, so how much money you've invested. And the reason we look at the gearing ratio is how much of your capital, how much of the money that you've invested is made up with your long-term liabilities. Okay, how much is made up from money that you borrowed, basically. Okay,